Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We're very excited to share information about Cycle 2 of the James Cary Smith Community Grant Program today. My name is Eleanor Mattern, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior staff specialist with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and my colleagues Anish Rana and Jen Ferreira are also on the line with us today, as well as Michael Chow. We are recording this event and we'll post it to our website. So we want to share some Zoom information first off. You should all see buttons on your screen to mute yourself when not speaking and to share your video if you would like. You can also see information about how to rename yourself, raise your hand, and use the chat feature. If you have technical issues at any point, please feel free to send us a message in the chat, or if you don't have access to the chat, you can email us at communitygrants@baaqmd.gov. So we want to share some webinar info and some participation principles. So again, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the Air District's website. Questions about the grant program will also be posted to the website. And then our principles of participation for today, we ask that one person speak at a time. Please mute yourself when not speaking. And then as we know, technology happens. So we ask that if for any reason the Zoom cuts out, just be flexible and patient and we'll start back up. So in terms of our agenda for today, we'll provide an overview of the Air District. We'll share background about our agency's community grant program. We'll present information about Cycle 2 of the James Cary Smith Community Grant Program. We'll discuss who can apply, eligible activities, and important dates. We'll share resources and discuss application assistance. And we will, of course, hold time for questions and answers. You're welcome to put questions into the chat at any point during the presentation. Staff will address those during the Q&A section of the event. And after the presentation, there will also be an opportunity to unmute and ask questions. So now I will pass it to Anish.
Thanks, Eleanor. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us this morning and your interest in the Air District's James Cary Smith Community Grant Program. I'd like to first start with a brief overview of the Air District. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District was established in 1955, making it the first regional air pollution control agency in the nation. And we're one of 35 air districts in California. The Air District regulates stationary sources of air pollution in the 9 counties that surround the Bay. And our mission is to create a healthy breathing environment for every Bay Area resident while protecting and improving public health, air quality, and the global climate. Next slide, please. In terms of background, the Air District has provided grant funding to local nonprofit organizations for over a decade to support community-based solutions to improve local air quality and public health. The James Cary Smith, or JCS Community Grant Program, is named for Jim Smith, the Air District's former community outreach manager, who launched the first community grants program in 2009. Mr. Smith sadly passed away in 2015 from ALS, and the grant program extends his vision of a more engaged and empowered community. Next slide, please. We're currently requesting applications for Cycle 2 of the JCS Community Grant Program with a total of $1.5 million available to community-based organizations. The maximum amount for an individual grant is $300,000 over a 3-year period with a maximum of $100,000 per year. The grant program supports the full involvement and leadership of communities most directly impacted by environmental injustices to influence policy and improve air quality. Next slide, please. So who can apply? All current and recent JCS grantees can apply, as well as any California community-based organization or CBO with a 501c3 status, or CBOs in partnership with a fiscal sponsor that is also a California CBO with 501c3 status. And I'd also like to highlight for those recent JCS grantees or anyone who's been tracking this program since we last launched a request for applications. Unlike Cycle 1, this cycle, applicants can propose projects in any of the 4 designated Assembly Bill 617 communities, which includes the Bayview Hunters Point, Southeast San Francisco community, East Oakland, West Oakland, and the Richmond, North Richmond, San Pablo area. Next slide, please. In terms of evaluation, applications will be reviewed after the submittal deadline, which is 5 p.m. on January 7th, 2025. Incomplete applications or applications that do not meet all minimum requirements will be automatically disqualified from the application review process. So it's really important to make sure you fill out all of the components of the application. All eligible applications will be evaluated and ranked according to the scoring criteria shared in the request for applications document. Next slide, please. As noted in section 8 of the request for applications document titled, "How will proposals be evaluated?" preference in the form of 5 extra points will be awarded to proposed projects serving 1 or more communities that are awaiting Assembly Bill 617 designation, including the Pittsburgh Bay Point area, San Jose, San Leandro, the Tri-Valley, including cities of Dublin, Livermore, Pleasanton, San Ramon, Vallejo, or have an overall score of 70 to 100 in CalEnviro Screen 4.0. Or communities that are identified as environmental justice communities using a screening methodology other than CalEnviro Screen 4.0. Next slide, please. So with this map, we'd like to share additional information about CalEnviro Screen. This is a screening methodology that can be used to help identify California communities that are disproportionately burdened by multiple sources of air pollution. This is a screenshot of an interactive map that we've created. I know the image is small when we're zoomed out, but you can visit the link that we'll put in the chat. You will be able to zoom in and out to see more detail. The thick dark lines show the borders of the Air District's jurisdiction. The pink areas indicate communities with an overall score of 70 to 100 in CalEnviro Screen 4.0. And the blue areas show boundaries for the 4 Assembly Bill 617 designated communities. If you click on an area and zoom in, a window will pop up indicating the city and county and the census tract number and other detailed information. If you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat and we'll respond to those questions following this presentation. And now I'd like to turn it over to Eleanor to share information about eligible grant activities.
Great, thank you, Nish. So a variety of activities are eligible for the James Cary Smith Community Grant funding. Funded work can include any combination of the following: community organizing. So that could be designing and implementing strategies to organize communities around air quality and other environmental justice issues. It can also include authentic participation. So organizations can support the full involvement and leadership of environmental justice or EJ communities to influence policy and improve air quality. And so the next slides explain those categories in more detail. So for the community organizing category, this can include any of the following strategies to organize communities. And it may be a combination. We know for a lot of folks, it's a combination of things. Perhaps education, outreach, community needs assessments, leadership development, community mobilizing, and/or coalition building. And then in terms of authentic participation, that can include any of the following strategies to support, again, the full involvement and leadership of EJ communities. So perhaps providing communities with resources and information, planning activities that help communities learn about local air quality issues, explore root causes of air pollution and its impact on public health, and identify agencies that may address their concerns. Could also include providing advocacy training and/or leadership training and/or facilitation training. And it can also include making recommendations to Air District staff. So on the next slide, we want to share some important dates in this Cycle 2 grant process. The first thing to note is that the application period is open now. That will close on Tuesday, January 7th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. We cannot accept applications after that 5 p.m. cutoff, so please make note of that and allow yourself some time. So some key dates during the coming weeks. We have another webinar coming up on November 7th, and that one is a little bit different. You'll hear more information about it in just a moment. That is a tips and tricks pre-grant application webinar. That one, just like this one, will be recorded, and we will post the recording and the slide deck to our grant webpage, excuse me. Then on December 4th at 5 p.m., that is the deadline for all questions about grant applications. And so please make sure to submit any questions you have by 5 p.m. on December 4th. Staff will then write up responses, and we will post all responses to grant application questions received by 5 p.m. on December 12th. And we'll post those on the Air District's website. As I noted, all grant applications will be due on January 7th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Following that, a grant application review panel will review and score applications in January. We will send notices of grant awards via email in Q1 of 2025. And then in spring of 2025, staff will work with grantees to draft and finalize grant agreements. Following that, grantees will perform work for 1 to 3 years, depending on the length of the contract. And grantees will submit regular progress reports and deliverables and invoices to the Air District during that time. So at this time, we'd like to shift gears and talk about a few resources. You can learn more about this grant program on the Air District's website. We're putting the link in the chat. And that is also where we will post the slides and the recording from this webinar, as well as the November 7th webinar. We will post responses to frequently asked questions there periodically during the application period until December 12th. And you can learn about projects that were funded by Cycle 1 of the James Cary Smith Community Grant Program on the Air District's website. Then this third bullet point, we also want to note that the Air District hosted a public funding workshop in May of 2024 to help community groups assess their interest and fit for applying for federal and state grant opportunities. So that workshop did not provide specific information about applying for Air District grants. However, we believe that some resources from that event may be useful for your organizations. So for example, there is a robust public funding resource guide in English and Spanish and several videos. One of them is longer, it's the recording of the webinar, and some of them are very short and digestible. So we're sharing the link so that folks can really explore those resources to help build the information and tools for your organizations. So again, these are general resources. One thing that I will note here is that to ensure that all prospective applicants have an equal opportunity for funding for Cycle 2 of this grant, Air District staff and technical assistance providers can't provide feedback on specific applications during the application period. So speaking of technical assistance, now I'd like to pass it over to Mona Aboud of Interethnica to share information about general application assistance that's available during the grant application period.
Great. Thank you so much, Eleanor. Thanks everyone for being here. My name is Mona Aboud, as Eleanor mentioned, and I'm here with Interethnica. We are helping the Air District on many projects, and on this one, we've had the honor and privilege on the last grant cycle in this one in providing technical assistance. First, I want to call out, we have a webinar coming up on November 7th at 2 p.m. It's entirely optional, and this is a tips and tricks webinar. I want to acknowledge that the Air District team has put in an incredible effort and intentionality around trying to simplify the grant process as much as possible and broaden its reach. That being said, we still know that grant processes can sometimes feel still cumbersome. We've got our workloads already happening, and there's the bonfire platform that you'll need to submit within. So we're hoping that this tips and tricks webinar is a great place for you to come and learn a couple of new things potentially and get more familiarized with some of the tools. So during the session on November 7th, we'll provide a quick overview of the grant. We'll introduce also some valuable tools to hopefully make grant writing, or at least proofing your grant writing, slightly easier. And we'll offer a live demonstration on how to use both Calendviro Screen and Bonfire. So as you heard Eleanor and Anish mention earlier, Calendviro Screen 4.0 will be helpful to see if your project qualifies for extra points potentially. And then the Bonfire platform is where you will submit your proposal. So if you've never used Bonfire, we're going to do a live demonstration on how to use that online platform at this webinar. For those who joined the session today or registered, we'll send a reminder email and calendar invite to this. Again, it's optional, but we'd love to have you there. And if you have any questions for us, I mean, of course, let us know, but all of the questions will be submitted to the Air District for response. And while participation is optional, we hope you will join us. And with that, I'm actually going to transition us right into the Q&A component of the webinar today. So if you have questions, two ways to ask today. You can raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, or you can send your messages in the chat. We'll alternate between raised hands, and my colleague Deborah will keep track of what's coming in the chat, and we'll go in order that way. We'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible. There's a ton of time left here to answer some questions, and the Air District team is here to provide the best response possible today. But please note that the written responses that will be provided no later than December 12th would be the final response with the most authority. So if there's any difference with what's said today and what's written, please refer to those written responses on the 12th. So thank you all again for your engagement, and let's dive into Q&A. Does anyone have any questions? Any questions?
And while folks are thinking of their questions, Mona, this is Eleanor. Perhaps we can just acknowledge that some folks we know joined this session late, and we're very happy to let you know that this is all being recorded. So please don't worry. We will post the recording and the slide deck on the Air District website.
All right. Thank you, Eleanor. Marty, you have your hand raised. Hi, Marty.
Thank you, Mona. I have a question. How many grants? How many grants is this particular grant going to provide? How many slots are going to be available to nonprofits? And is it going to be distributed evenly or equitably across the board from Gilroy to San Jose? And is there any other monies coming in back of that to continue the work? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Marty. This is Eleanor. I can address that. We do anticipate that this will be a very competitive grant cycle. The exact number of slots will depend on what dollar amounts folks request in their grant applications. We would anticipate perhaps 6 to 11 slots, depending on how many folks request what dollar amounts and for what duration of time. We are always exploring with the Air District other opportunities to boost the funds available for this program. And so we will certainly continue keeping our ears open for that. In terms of equitable distribution, Marty, you had asked, I think, about geography of the grants. The application review panel we'll be looking at all grant applications that are complete and pass the minimum qualification screening. And certainly the review panel will be taking into consideration geography. With such a limited number of spots, we can't guarantee, unfortunately, that every single environmental justice community in the Air District's jurisdiction will receive a grant or will receive exactly the same dollar amount for a grant. However, the application review panel will look at not oversaturating a particular area. For example, we would want to avoid awarding 10 grants in one county. So you can imagine that will be part of the process.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. The last question I have is, in terms of the grant itself, what was I going to say? Was it, sorry, just went blank for a second. in terms of the grant, should we apply for the 3-year run, or is it the application addresses the 2-year run in the application submittal?
Maybe what I can do, Marty, I'm just pulling up the application right here, and there is a place in the application to indicate whether an organization, the total number of years of funding desired, so the maximum is 3, it could be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and the amounts requested could vary. Some folks, for example, choose to request a larger dollar amount for year 1 and then taper a little bit because perhaps they have other funding sources or the needs of their funded project will shift in some way. That just depends on the organization. And then the application review panel will look at the narrative and will look at the explanation of the project for backup and to really better understand those requests.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marty. And if other folks have questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'm going to go to some chat questions next. So we'll just go one at a time. I'll read them out loud, and Eleanor and team, feel free to jump in. So one question we have from Socorro is, community organizing and active participation sound extremely similar to me. Do we have to pick one track? How do we differentiate between them?
Hi, Socorro. That's a great question. They are, it is a somewhat arbitrary distinction. We recognize that there's a lot of bleeding together. No, an applicant can mark both of those program categories on their application, and then can certainly braid together different strategies throughout a funded project. So again, the narrative would be a chance to provide some information about the planned approach and explain that approach, and certainly the communities where projects would take place. So I hope that helps.
Great. Thank you, Eleanor. Next question is, can religious organizations apply? And this question comes from Russell.
Hi, Russell. An organization must have a 501c3 tax exempt status. If an organization has a religious affiliation and has 501c3 status, they could be considered. If an organization, or I should say an entity, does not have 501c3 status, they can certainly work with a fiscal sponsor in order to apply. So that's something to note. And then we do encourage partnerships, and we recognize that faith-based efforts are a critical part of this work. And so there is a part of the narrative, question 5, that invites applicants to provide a description of existing or planned partnerships. And those could be partnerships with faith-based organizations, private businesses, and schools and other entities as well.
All right. Thank you, Eleanor. Next question comes from Whitney. Whitney says, hello. Hi, Whitney. If we are a current grantee, can we apply to continue the same and or similar programming?
Hi, Whitney. Thanks for the question. Yes, current grantees or year 1 grantees who were involved in year 1 of cycle 1 can certainly submit applications to continue the same or similar programming. We would hope to see in the narrative some clear language about how those projects would build off of the success of cycle 1 and really leverage learnings and perhaps either expand or deepen the capacity building work that they are doing.
All right. Thank you. Another question from Emily. What other environmental justice issues will be considered?
I'll start that one, and then maybe Anisha, I can pass it over to you as well. We know that, of course, as an air district, air quality and public health should be one of the key issues that proposed projects consider. We do know, of course, that there are a lot of overlapping concerns, as we can see on Cal EnviroScreen, excuse me, 4.0, and as we know from communities that experience particularly high burdens of environmental injustices, a lot of different factors come together and affect the impact of health. public health in a region. And so we won't limit and say, you know, it must be A, B, and C environmental justice issues. We would leave that to prospective applicants to really lift up in their narratives and make the case when describing the project summary, the community description, and describing what it is and what other environmental justice issues the applicant feels should be considered in order to conduct a successful project.
All right, thank you. And just a reminder, you can raise your hand if you want to ask your question live, but we're going to continue down through the chat. Next question is from Dave. Dave asks, will preference be given to projects in communities awaiting AB 617 designation over those that are not yet comma, sorry, yet still have a CalEnviro screen score of greater than 70?
So I'm understanding the question is no preference. The 5 extra points will be awarded to no preference. There is no preference for AB 617 communities over communities that have a CalEnviro screen of 70 or greater, or vice versa.
Okay. Thank you, Anish. Next question from Russell. Is the grant reimbursement based? Is it reimbursement based?
I can speak to that, Russell. Thanks for the question. The grant is not reimbursement based. It is a deliverables based contract. And so the Air District typically provides some seed funding after the contract is executed. And then payment would be issued, we anticipate, every 4 months. So that would be, again, a deliverables based contract.
Okay, thank you, Eleanor. Next question is from Aloni or Aoloni, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your name. The question is, hello, hi. If an org is doing larger projects in 2 different counties, should they submit 1 application or 2?
Thank you for the question. We would advise submitting 1 application, and the application should clearly state the community or communities. If it's larger, then that's not a problem, but explaining who would benefit, why the project is needed, and why it makes sense to run that project in 2 different counties.
Thank you. Next question. It's the last one I'm seeing, but we have plenty of time. So if you have more questions, feel free to raise your hand or add to the chat. From Maria, they ask, I tried to find information on communities awaiting AB 617 designations in the resources provided on your website and alongside the grant RFP. I could find lots of information for Northern San Mateo County, but not specifically this. Where do I find this information?
So the communities that are awaiting AB 617 designation are listed in the presentation. We noted them in the presentation. They're also listed in the RFA. If you have, I would suggest, if you in those boundaries for those communities, because they're still awaiting, they have just the way that AB 617 works. When a community is proposed and receives designation from CARB, the Air District or that community work together to identify the specific boundaries. So right now, those communities that have been identified as awaiting, they haven't set those boundaries yet. We have an idea of on census tracts of what those communities look like. And so if you have, I would say if you're looking for more specific information or have a question whether the area that you're thinking about proposing your projects in, feel free to send us a question and we can provide you a little bit more specific information to help you verify that.
All right. So that's all the questions I've seen come in so far. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anybody, we missed one. I don't see any other hands raised as well. I did see a few folks join in just the last 5 or so minutes. So friendly reminder that the recording for this webinar will be posted on the Air District's website, and the time period to submit more questions goes through December 4th. So if you do have questions, please continue to submit those to the Air District. And with that, I will pass it on back to Eleanor, if you want to give any closing statements.
Great. Thank you all so much for your time this morning. Oh, I do see a hand. So let me actually pause and let's turn it over to Caro. Hi, Caro.
Hi, Lenore. Hi, everyone. Caro with Brightline. Quick question. Could we potentially partner with other government agencies too? Like, let's say we want to do air quality and open spaces or something like that. Would it be okay to reach out to other government agencies? Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Caro. And just to clarify, when you say reach out to other government agencies, would you mean in terms of like subrecipient of grant funds, or just in terms of identifying them as partners on the narrative?
I guess what's allowed in terms of partnerships with them, whether it's like a letter of support or if it can be like a greater commitment.
Good question. We actually don't require, and in fact, don't accept any letters of support for this grant application. So please keep that in mind. In terms of what's allowed, we, again, welcome partnerships, and folks are encouraged to identify any information about existing or planned partnerships on question 5 of the narrative. There's also a requirement to submit a budget with the application. And if there is other funding coming in from another public agency or another entity that will help support this project, the proposed project, that's wonderful. And we ask that folks share that information on their budget. Just a reminder that the budget, again, is a required component of each application. However, it is not scored. But just to restate that, because that wasn't a particular slide, we have these minimum requirements that folks need to keep in mind when they are uploading everything to the bonfire portal that Mona mentioned. And again, for folks who joined recently, the webinar recently, we will have a detailed webinar coming up on November 7th that will get into a lot of information about how to navigate that portal, how to anticipate things, some different recommendations for working with that process. So again, back to the budget, a budget is recommended. Folks will, in fact, required, folks will need to submit a budget. And again, that can be a place where folks list other funders for this project, either potential funders or current funders working on this kind of thing. So Kato, I hope that helped address your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor. Another question came in the chat. This one's from Emily. Would projects in Sonoma County be considered?
Hi, Emily. Thanks for the question. So the Air District's jurisdiction is interesting. It includes part of Solano County and part of Sonoma County. So let's drop the link to our interactive map in the chat one more time. On that map, you can zoom in, scroll out, and you'll see the portion of Sonoma County that falls within the Air District's jurisdiction. You'll also see in pink any areas that would be considered preferential geographies. So please keep that in mind. Thanks, Deborah. Just dropped the link to the map. Please keep that in mind. Folks can apply from anywhere in the Bay Area's jurisdiction. And again, as Anish was mentioning, preference will be given to projects that are in the top 30th percentile of the Cal Enviro Screen 4.0, and those are indicated in pink on the map. So if you have any questions as you're exploring the map, please don't hesitate to reach out to the grants team. Again, our email address is communitygrants@baaqmd.gov.
All right. I don't see any other questions or hands raised. Giving it just a couple seconds here in case someone has a last minute question. All right. Well, again, questions can come in through December 4th at 5 p.m. to the email that was just dropped in the chat, and Eleanor mentioned, communitygrants@baaqmd.gov. So Eleanor, I'll hand it back to you. Thanks for all the questions, everyone.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to the Air District team and our technical assistance team at Interethnica. We look forward to seeing many of you on November 7th for that webinar. No registration is required for that. You will just come right onto the Zoom using the link. And again, we welcome any questions during the grant period. Thanks for your interest, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.